So thanks everyone for joining me today. I'm really excited to be here, and as Mehdi has already told you, I'm here to talk about the metaverse. We're going to go through a bit about the origins, we're going to get rid of some of the misconceptions, and we're going to see a bit what financial services could actually look like in the metaverse in the future. So my name is Thiam. I work for a company called Tasobe. We are a Berlin-based banking technology consulting firm. So we help banks push the boundaries of what's possible through technology, and specifically APIs. Now, it may not be conventional, but I'd like to start with a bit of reading. Hero is approaching the street. It is the Broadway, the Champs-Élysées of the metaverse. It is the brilliantly lit boulevard that can be seen reflected in the lenses of his goggles. It doesn't really exist, but right now, millions of people are walking up and down it. Now, this book, Snow Crash, was published in 1992. And it's not even the first time we mentioned the concept of an immersive virtual reality world. In fact, I think the first time was in the 1930s, almost 100 years ago. So today, we're going to go on a journey of discovery, right? We are going to discover the origins of the metaverse, how new this concept actually is, and we're going to know how traditional financial institutions can realistically get involved in this. But what is the metaverse first, right? So I'm sorry to say, we can't fully define that in a sentence just yet. And even when we do reach a final common definition for it, the metaverse will always be slightly different for everyone. It will depend on our own unique interpretation, why we use it, and how it makes us feel. But there is one definition that I'm quite fond of. Now, supported by the internet, AI, and blockchain, the virtual and real world are coupled, and a realistic mirror world is recreated according to one's own subjective imagination. So notice how it says coupled. They are not separate. It's not a virtual and physical world separate. They are coupled, they are intertwined, right? They are connected. So despite the very specific definitions of the metaverse that we have been hearing in the past few years, especially in relation to business and making money, the reality is that it's an enhanced reflection of our physical world, and it allows you to do many new things, too many to even imagine at this stage. Which is also why, in 10 years' time, the definition, even the name, could be something completely different. Just think of the internet in the 90s and how it was referred to as the information superhighway. That never really stuck, did it? So let's briefly go back to the book we were reading before. So the dimensions of the street are fixed by a protocol. Developers can build their own small streets, feeding off of the main one. They can build building, parks, signs, and things that do not exist in reality, such as special neighborhoods where the rules of three-dimensional space-time are ignored. Now, even back then, it was described pretty well. The rules, they are fixed by protocol, they are fixed by code. Developers, the metaverse allows for expansion, so it allows for additional things that don't exist in reality because it just allows you to do many more things. Now, as we humans do and have been doing for a long time, we've taken inspiration from this and other stories, and we're creating it in real life. Now, today we do have some metaverse experiences, as you probably know, but to really understand where it's going, we first have to understand the real history. So before jumping into Decentraland and the sandbox, we have another evolutionary link to observe. Games, right? So games can be considered precursors to the metaverse. Obviously, our objective for the metaverse goes well beyond what current games can offer, but they provide a look into what it could look like, and they play a key role in the development of metaverse platforms. Now, I won't spend too long on this slide, but I think there are some important things to see here, right? The building blocks. So RuneScape, published in 2001, a massive multiplayer online game with a sophisticated player-driven economy. A lot of the concepts that we see today in DeFi and Metaverse existed already back then. Mining of virtual goods, the negotiating to sell them at a decentralized market hub. So this is the closest thing that we had to the Metaverse in 2001 already, okay? But moving on, I think you probably all know The Sims here, right? But not many people know Second Life. And they're similar, they're both simulations. But Second Life, it's really where we started to move away from the idea that the virtual world was just for gaming. Because Second Life, you don't have any objectives. You just create an avatar and you hang out, right? And that was very weird in the 2000s. That was incredibly strange. So the creators actually were really inspired by Snow Crash. Soon after, various clothing brands started to get interested in this. So it became home to clothing brands. And they started to organize events and concerts, right? Things that today we say that the metaverse, that's what it's all about. But these are the building blocks. But really it starts to get interesting with Roblox and Fortnite. Now, these two are more environments where you can create your own games. And at this point, we can stop calling them games, we can start calling them experiences, because it doesn't stop at gaming. They do concerts, basically, the limit is your imagination, okay? And obviously the target for these, they're very young. I've been on them to see a bit what they're doing, and obviously, you can tell it's quite for young people. However, this then gives rise to the future of the metaverse, right? So this is what we were talking about at Snow Crash, the small roads leading off of the street, the ability to develop on top of the virtual world, and that is a key feature, right? But even though Roblox and Fortnite, I can say we can consider them kind of metaverses, we took it a step further, right? So we took it a step further with DeFi and blockchain. Now, even though the metaverse has been in the common imagination since long before blockchain officially came around, obviously it was blockchain that is actually pushing it towards reality. Now, today, we refer to the metaverse as a world that runs on blockchain, possibly uses native cryptocurrencies, they use non-fungible tokens or NFTs to prove the ownership of their digital assets. And this obviously includes the Decentraland and the Sandbox, but many more. And the list is growing quite fast, right? So in these environments, you can buy plots of land, you can develop, you can build on it, you can rent it out. You can earn directly in the metaverse. Now, this is all a step further from the proto-metaverse experiences because any digital asset that existed would belong to the game producer, okay? So you could not make money, at least not legally, in those games. So there is something that I think is really important to understand, is that these metaverses are in their infancy. They don't have many active users, especially compared to their predecessors. And as we know, there's a lot of speculation, right? It went hand in hand with all the hype around cryptocurrencies, but I really have to underline this. The metaverse and DeFi are not one and the same thing, which is why I try to make clear that the concept, it's been around since the 1930s. And this is the reason why some people think it's a passing fad, but it's really not. So, this is what I mean. So, we're not just talking about crypto, we're not just talking about socializing, we are talking about new experiences. We're talking about, on the left here, we have immersive surgical VR training. On the right, we have, a conference in VR. I'm happy to see you face-to-face today. I'm sure you are too, but imagine how easy it might have been during the pandemic if we'd had a more mature VR and metaverse landscape, right? So these experiences with more advanced tracking technologies are going to reach levels that I think, couldn't have imagined just 10 years ago. And behind these experiences, we're going to have the likes of Google, Facebook, Microsoft, the tech giants, right? So the ones that already are behind a lot of the experiences today. So I'm just going to give you two examples. Microsoft acquired Activision, a leading video game publisher, for $70 billion. So Microsoft already has quite a presence in the gaming world. This just enhances capabilities. Facebook bought Oculus back in 2014 and proceeded to change its name to Meta, okay? So the dedication to the metaverse here. So 2 weeks ago, they announced a partnership to bring Microsoft Teams Office products into Meta's VR world, and this stuff is really big. So these are big movements from organizations that already have a place in their customer's life, right? And that goes for banks as well. And so this is what we're here for, right? So banks, how can banks actually get involved in this? This is a selection of banks that have publicly announced their metaverse initiatives. We're going to have a look at some of them, and we're going to look at what they're doing and why they're doing it. So we couldn't have a banking in the metaverse list without OldJP. So this is the Onyx Lounge in Decentraland. I'm there just having a look at their reading area. They have some quizzes to help you pass the time. So very simple. They don't offer financial products in their lounge. This is what I would call more a copy-paste, right? So you copy and paste a physical lounge in the metaverse, and that's fine. But let's see what's going on in South Korea. So on the left, we have KB Bank. They're testing their Metaverse VR branch. Now, with this branch, they aim to help customers interact with their finances in different ways. So that means basically just putting on your virtual reality headset, checking your financial information, or designing investment portfolios, for example. On the right, we have another example, and this is Industrial Bank of Korea. Now, Industrial Bank of Korea actually chose an existing metaverse called Cyworld Z, yeah? So they chose this metaverse, and they decided that they wanted to target the new segments in this metaverse based on the specific challenges that they're facing in that metaverse. So there are two different approaches. Obviously, they have two different goals, and one does not exclude the other, of course. But it's just interesting to see the different goals of banks and how that then translates in what they'll do in the metaverse, right? And this is a personal favorite of mine by Nonghyuk Bank. The Doctoverse is themed on an island of the same name, an island that is important to the Korean people and maybe not so easy to reach, okay? So in this metaverse, You can subscribe to financial products that are tied to the island. You can participate in activities like picking up litter. And you can order things that are local to the area. I don't quite understand this, but I think you can order local shrimp. So interesting things, right? And it's a very specific use case that was born to emphasize the special meaning, of this island, but also perhaps to provide another experience for a place that might be a bit difficult to reach otherwise, And then, as you can see by this nice little stadium, HSBC is centering its virtual land in the sandbox on sports, esports, and gaming. So possibly we could see some interesting events for the esports community, services for the esports community, which is also growing. So the esports community is growing and it's becoming more accepted. So it's an interesting target to have for HSBC. And of course, there was Standard Chartered as well in the sandbox, but I can't show you the video. Here we have Shinhan Bank, and this is where it started to get a bit complicated getting screenshots. Sorry about that, because a lot of the stuff is quite still not public. So Shinhan Bank is doing something different. KT Corp has a metaverse, and they want to integrate Shinhan's infrastructure, right? So this is more of a background thing. So you integrate the payment infrastructure, your financial infrastructure, to power the transactions in the metaverse. So even if it's background, Shinhan is not stopping there. They want to integrate their infrastructure, but they also want to create an offering for commercial real estate. Now, I don't have details on this, but the metaverse and VR, they enable a lot of use cases for this, right? Think from the most basic, virtual reality tours of a digital property. So it will be interesting to see what Shinhan will do there. On the other side, we have CBI from the UAE, the first bank to complete a candidate recruitment in the metaverse. So something completely different. They're interviewing potential employees in the metaverse. And I think it's good, if you're looking for metaverse talent and blockchain talent, for example, younger talent, this could be an interesting. Waba Bank, again, I couldn't find them. I looked for them in the Central and the Sandbox, but I couldn't find them. They are bringing Islamic finance to young Muslims of the metaverse. So each of these banks have, they have different targets, different goals, and they're using the metaverse for their goals, okay? But of course, when banks enter the metaverse, you're not just going to encounter other banks, are you? You're going to encounter a lot of competition. You're going to encounter the competition you know already that is rising now, so crypto wallets, exchanges, DeFi providers, all of that. You're going to encounter fintech companies that also are going to want to offer services in the metaverse, okay? But you're going to encounter also new players with new ideas and new ways of thinking. So I'm not saying it like to make you panic. I'm just saying that it's going to be full of new things, right? And it's also going to be full of new financial products. But, the financial products that are arising in the metaverse, they are very similar to existing ones. They're similar to traditional ones. TerraZero is offering the first mortgages on virtual property, and it works a lot like a normal mortgage, right? You hold the property as collateral as an NFT. But of course, there are things to take into consideration. I'll mention that later. But all of this, I think, all of the use cases that we just mentioned, they're great and all, but there is one thing that all banks will have to take into consideration, even if you don't want to open up shop in the metaverse, okay? The connection. We are going to require a myriad of background integrations to make the metaverse realistic, okay? So imagine this. I go to the virtual shop in the metaverse, and I want to buy something, but I haven't topped up my crypto wallet, so I have to check my bank account. You know what? I want to use my bank account. I don't want to use my crypto wallet. So I take off my headset, I log into the banking app, I check my balance, I put my headset back on, and then I find out that I can't even pay directly. I have to use a third-party on-ramp, which is really frustrating, right? And this is probably what it's going to be like in the first period of the metaverse. The alternative is that I select the thing I want to buy, my metaverse wallet aggregates my accounts already, and I buy it. And that is what it's supposed to be. I think that's the least we should be able to do in the metaverse, even if there are, no fancy use cases. This open banking connection is important, right? So then we envision these worlds, these different worlds, some decentralized, some centralized. They will require data from the outside world, but also they will need to communicate with each other. And this is where real-time frameworks and APIs will come in, of course, right? So APIs will power transactions, they will power commerce within virtual worlds, but also they will help us with various integrations. And in particular, I am looking forward to APIs helping us unify our financial data. So I, for example, have a bank account, a digital bank account, and 2 crypto wallets that I use for 2 separate purposes, right? Obviously, I'm going to want to unify those, right? So these are some examples, and there's nothing too fancy. It's just a friendly neighborhood open banking APIs for the first two ones, right? And that's what we were talking about. It's the least we should be able to do, checking our account, making payments, right? Moving forward, there are some other interesting things that we could do. So for example, in the metaverse, it could be possible that there are services or areas that require KYC, and I could KYC with my bank. What if my bank could publish a certificate that proves that I am KYC'd? There is customer data, banks have customer data, that will come in handy in the metaverse, and customers are going to want to securely access it from the metaverse without breaking their immersion. That is really important, without breaking the immersive nature, right, of the metaverse. But of course, there are challenges, as always. So the first two, we talk about these at every event, company culture and legacy systems. I think they don't really need much of an explanation. The company culture, if you want to embrace change, then your culture has to be flexible enough to accommodate it, right? Like, if you're not able to get behind the concepts of the metaverse and also not able to get in the mindset that goes beyond the three-dimensional limitations, right, of the physical world, it's going to be really difficult to manage the initiative and also to gain a return on it, right? Legacy systems, as well, doesn't need much of an explanation. You need to be able to expose your data. You need to be able to expose your services. In short, you cannot have a fossil powering a metaverse project, okay? Sorry. Privacy. So this is where it gets a bit particular, right? So the metaverse collects and processes an incredible amount of data, and it's pretty sensitive. So things like vocal inflections, facial expressions, your physiological responses, that can be collected, and that is sensitive data. In addition to this, the metaverse platform can follow you much closer than anyone can in real life. They can know where you are, what you're doing. And there are going to be loads of third parties waiting to get their hands on this data, right, to inject content in front of you, wherever you are in the metaverse. And of course, all of this has to be regulated. Security as well. There are going to be sophisticated cyber attacks, and they could take completely new forms. I don't know if anyone here has ever read, these kind of dystopian novels about the metaverse, where there's a virus that perhaps could connect to your brain and things like that. And it seems out of this world, right? But how much control could a cyber attacker have on someone who is in the metaverse, right? These are things that we should really think about and take into consideration. Now, compliance, obviously, because there's a lot of uncertainty around policy, around regulation, it's a bit complicated. And a lot of banks I see are hesitant. They don't really want to jump in, and that's normal. But you really don't have to offer financial products to get started in the metaverse. You can start by having conversations, start understanding what it is that you want to do, kind of understand your business focus and understand how the metaverse can help you achieve that, right? Budget is actually one of the worst ones here because, if you can't justify your investment, then you will not get budget for it. So that is going to be one of the most difficult things. And as I said, be creative about it. So align your initiative as much as possible to existing objectives. And believe me, you could find a use that you have not thought of before, right? But obviously, these aren't the only ones. There are lots of new terms, new concepts, new things. So for example, the Terra Zero mortgages, right? Think about the coin volatility. How do you manage that? So that exists in real life, but it has such a greater impact in the metaverse, So just to summarize the opportunities, the basic ones that we talked about before. Providing new experiences to existing customers, right? So the ones that we mentioned, letting them interact through virtual reality. Providing infrastructure, taking a background role, right? And then we have targeting a new segment in the metaverse with their specific challenges. But these are basic. Yeah, this is not what my generation is looking for in the long term. Absolutely not. If in 10 years' time, this is what is going on, then there's no point in building the metaverse, in my opinion. We are looking for different ways to represent money and finances, okay? We're looking for something that goes beyond, as we said, the three-dimensional limits of the physical world. And it's difficult because we are so used to censoring and removing ideas that aren't possible. We don't do this consciously, we just subconsciously remove that. And it's difficult to move from that to thinking in another way, right? Thinking that everything is possible. It's not something that will come easily to everyone. So imagine if instead of this, I see something like this, a 3D representation of my stock portfolio. Now this is actually has actually been around since 2014. This is Fidelity Investments, okay? So the 3D representation of my stock portfolio, a new way to visualize information. But let's get a bit more creative and a bit more silly. So imagine instead of my bank account, in addition to seeing my bank account balance, I want to see a vault with stacks of money that get bigger as my money gets larger. Or this, gold. It's not going to cost more. It's virtual, right? So this, I know it's silly, but I would totally have an extension like this in a Metaverse space. I wouldn't mind. But of course, we're here for useful things. So just thinking, nowadays, when I want to maybe ask Revolut support for something, I find that I miss the human touch. And ironically, the Metaverse can help with that. So what if, instead of going to a lounge in the Metaverse, I have my personal AI-powered bank teller in my Metaverse space? And I can personalize that as much as I want to. And yeah, sure, maybe the bank account belongs to HSBC or Barclays, and they can have the logo, but I can do whatever I want there. And this is good when you're missing that human touch. I know it's strange to think, Metaverse, human touch? But it is. You're kind of fooling your senses to think that you're actually talking to a person, right? So this is why I say that you're going to find a lot of new ways to represent money, to represent finances, to help customers understand their finances. You're going to have very little restriction on your creativity, which is why I'm so excited about this and why I think you should be too. I don't know how much time I have. Yeah, so I just wanted to end with a little note that I understand the uncertainty around Metaverse adoption, mainly because I felt it. Now, I'm a storyteller, and I'm a writer. I've always dreamt about publishing books, a lot of books, and not the e-books, the ones that you flip and you smell the pages, those ones. I like those ones. So when I heard the Metaverse, I was really excited because I've been waiting for that for a long time. So I was like, oh, all this disruption, all these new experiences, and all these new ways to tell stories. And I said, oh, damn, I'm obsolete. Like that, by the time I publish a book, no one's going to want to read it. And so I was kind of upset at the Metaverse at the start, but then I started thinking, well, physical books, I started thinking of all times I wanted to put a song in there because I wanted to let the reader know that I was listening to that song during the scene, but I couldn't really do that, could I? All the times I wanted to, put something that is so particular that it would just lack in written form, right? And on the other side, I am passionate about game development. I would like to write a story-driven video game because I'm a storyteller. And then I realized this. I'm a storyteller, okay? I'm a writer, but I'm a storyteller. And I can do many more things. I can still publish books. I can still do that. That's not illegal, is it? But I can do so many more things. And that's when I really started to get excited, right? Because I started to have loads of ideas. And I'm not just excited about my own writing. I am really excited to see what financial services providers, right? Once they don't have any restrictions on their creativity, restrictions from this three-dimensional physical world that we have, I am super excited to see what you're going to do. And I really hope you are too. Yeah.
Thank you. We have time for a question. Yeah, here. Look at this. Wow, too much agility.
Thanks. Hi, thanks for that. One question that came to mind when I saw what looked like a bank branch in the Metaverse. Most of my trips to bank branches, they're not very pleasant. And I don't really like chatbots. So how much do you think these journeys are designed around what we would call happy paths, and has a lot of consideration been given to unhappy paths?
Well, okay, that's interesting because, when I go to the bank branch, at least in the physical world, I'm not so happy because I have to wait and maybe I have other things to do, right? In the virtual world, I'll be honest, the first time I heard of JP Morgan's lounge, I was not super enthusiastic about it because it is copy and pasting, okay? And if you're not happy in the physical world, then you're probably not going to be happy in the Metaverse with the copy and paste thing. So obviously, and chatbot, you mean the AI-powered bank teller, for example, right? Yeah. So obviously, AI. I think hopefully, we're going to reach new levels. So the chatbots of today are definitely not what I expect by a personal bank teller. Hopefully. So happy journeys. I mean, that's what we've been doing as well with fintech, isn't it? We've been trying to make the journey happier, and this often makes us kind of move away from the bank branch, doesn't it? So you would say it's kind of weird that we put the bank branch, but that's what I'm saying. Banks should, that's what I'm saying. So it's not about copying and pasting the lounge. It's not about bringing your financial services to the metaverse. It's understanding what your customer is wanting and how you can make that customer happy and how you can make that customer experience things that they've never experienced and how you can make it fun. Like, how can you make finance fun? And it can be done, like we've just seen with the room full of gold and whatever. Okay, so I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just, I understand that the copy and pasting thing is not the best, and I agree. It's not usually a happy journey to go to the bank branch, but I think that banks can come up with better things. Obviously, these examples are now. We're in 2022. These are things that we can do now, and I really, really hope that it's not going to be what we're going to do in 5 years, right? Is that kind of what you were asking?
Yeah, actually, I think I have a complementary question before the break.
Yeah.
The thing is, here we see buildings here. We see like kind of grass. We see a copy of you or digital twin, right? Which is a copy and paste. My question is like, is the metaverse, to your mind, will be a replica of the real world with easier stuff like we move faster and everything? Or it will be something really different? This is what I say. I want to be a knight elf riding a horse in the metaverse, right? I want to be a female black wizard magic, or I want to be a paladin level 70, right, with incredible powers. I don't want to be just myself putting my helmet and going, just on my bank branch or whatever in a metaverse. So where is the imagination? I know metaverse now is really pushed by companies like Meta and others. So, but like, where is the how the metaverse will be really different than the physical world to your mind? So where it's leading?
So so these questions are interesting because obviously I forgot to mention that we don't have at the moment the right mindset, right? I think when the internet came around, I don't think that they could ever imagine what would come out of the internet now. I mean, I really don't think so. I think that even I would ask this question to someone who's 15 years old. I really would, because even though I'm in the middle of the Generation Z and Millennial and all that stuff, but I think still a lot like in the physical sense. But because I'm not native, I do think that it will be completely different. I think there will be areas of the metaverse that will be much like the physical world, but just because that is something that it will be difficult to move away from that. But I think there will be ways that we cannot imagine to represent things, but represent ourselves, feel things. I think even, it could be that we'll start smelling things or tasting things in the metaverse. It's a bit difficult to say now. It's going to be completely different. And I think that the more we step away from this idea of the limits of three-dimensional space-time, the more we'll get closer to what we're supposed to do,
Yeah, because the quote from Peter Thiel, who said that 60 years ago we wanted flying cars, right? We believe we had flying cars in 2000, and now we have Twitter.
Yeah.
So he's what he says, right? And he said like, let's not lose this imagination. At least if the metaverse is happening, this is my personal opinion. Let's make it fun. Let's make it cool. Let's make it different. Let's make it like the envy to do something else, right? At least. But thank you very much for presenting that to us, right? And see you in the metaverse.
Yeah. See you hopefully.
Thank you, Thiam.